All right. So we'll call to order the Town of Farragut Visual Resources Review Board meeting for the month of April 2019. So the first item on our agenda tonight is the approval from the minutes from the March meeting. Is there any discussion relative to the minutes? All right. If we don't have any discussion, do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? All right, so moving down to the ground-mounted sign applications. The first one on the agenda is for the Board and Brush Creative Studio. It's a tenant panel, 11113 Kingston Pike. So,
Okay, and this tenant panel application's changed since what I put in the packet that I sent out to you. It's going in over by the Premier Eye Care in that center there. And when the sign company first did this illustration, they thought that they had that third of the sign, or half of the sign. But that's actually intended to be divided for the 4 tenant spaces. So they've revised it to that. It's quite a bit smaller. So each one of those tenant panels will be approximately 10 inches high. So in my initial write-up, I said that I thought that it was legible like this. I'm not sure that it would be legible at that size, particularly with the script font. That's a determination that y'all have to make, but that's it's getting fairly small there, and the script font makes it a little harder to read. So I think the issue now is whether or not the board feels that that's legible as proposed. When I first talked to the sign company, they were going to take the banner, the Creative Studio banner, off the bottom, which would give them more room to put the Board and Brush corporate didn't want that done, so they insisted that it be put on, and so now the question is whether or not it's legible as proposed.
So let me ask you a question. So obviously the bottom panel is nearly the same size as the other two together. Are they supposed to all be 3?
They'll all be
the same
divided. So
size?
basically, yeah, there'll be 4 panels on that right side of the sign. So
Gotcha.
So each panel will be approximately 10 inches high.
Okay, all right.
And that was something we did discuss with the owner of the Premier Center there, and they were aware of that when they proposed it, but they wanted that one half of the sign for themselves. And they were content with dividing the other half into 4 tenant panels, but now it's a matter of how much message can they put on one of those smaller tenant panels and still be legible from the street.
So our codes have a legibility test?
Well, the lettering has to be legible from the street that it's being viewed from.
That's in the code, okay.
Yeah.
This is something we've faced quite a bit before with signs like this, and obviously we want them to be able to use the logo that they choose whenever possible. But when you're going down Kingston Pike at the speeds through there, I would contend that you wouldn't be able to really read that. I mean, if you understood and knew their logo, you'd probably be able to pick it out. Yeah. But generally, that would be in the cursive font and in Creative Studios. I think that lettering would be hard to see or read at all from the standpoint of driving past there.
I mean, we could ask them to put a mock-up up on it, like print something on paper and put it up and see what it would look like. But I mean, just looking at that sign, particularly with the font that they're using and the size of the lettering there, I mean, those letters, the capital letters would probably be maybe 3 inches, and the smaller case obviously less than that, and that's getting pretty small for the distance that sign is set back from the road, and it's of course it's 4 lanes there, so it's with a center turn lane, so it's a pretty wide street as well. So
You did state that corporate required them to maintain the banner at the bottom.
yeah,
Then this is possibly a trademarked and corporate information, so this is what they have.
Yeah.
This is what they have to display.
Well, I mean, it's, but they don't have to have a tenant panel per se. So, I mean, the issue is our code requires tenant panels to be legible from the street. So if they want to have a tenant panel, they need to satisfy that. Now, we've had other instances where businesses, wanted a particular corporate branding, but when they couldn't get that, they did come up with an alternative design, and perhaps they'd be able to come up with an alternative design that would work better. If y'all don't feel that would be legible, or if you want to ask them to put it up so that staff could look at it and ensure, legibility from the road, that's another avenue you can go. But in terms of just, saying it's legible on its face and making a recommendation for approval, I can't do that right now.
I mean, saying something's legible or not is, to me, subjective. It's in the eye of the person looking at it. There's no test or, there's no empirical method of determining what's legible and what's not. So I would say that your idea then would have to be, staff's going to have to decide. And it should be maybe made a mock-up so that you could go decide.
If you want to go that route, or if you just, want to, deny it for now and see if they come up with another design. Either way, we can work with it that way. I mean, if it's not legible when we're out there, then they'll have to redesign anyway.
Does the business do something that the general public would recognize? If the creative studio was not on there?
It's we Googled the business just to see exactly what they do. It's one of these things where people can sort of book the thing and bring in a party or a group of people and essentially make signs and sort of socialize over the making of signs that, would be decorative for their homes or businesses or that sort of thing. So I think there's similar things where people get together and they paint and have I believe it's akin to that type of business.
Well, if I were going to go to that business and I had that name and I knew what they did,
Yeah.
having the creative studio would mean anything to me. I mean, but being able to see board and brush would be what I'd be looking for going down the road.
I was going to ask for your input on their wall sign as well. So that's what they're putting up on the wall of the business.
So then they've got that on their wall, so,
So, I mean, I think it looks fine.
yeah.
Yeah, and that, I mean, they have a lot more space to work with there to make that legible from the street, but, and I don't know if you've all been past the Premier Eye Care Center there, so you can probably get a sense for how far that sign is back from the road and whether you think that would be legible or not, or if you want it looked at.
I don't think it would, because I actually went to Premier when I needed new glasses, and I had to look from Kingston Pike pretty far to the left to see the Premier sign, so it's not like it's right in your face going down the road. And if I had to look for that one, I can't imagine having to look for this one.
Yeah, I think we've had several instances just like what we're talking about here, where when you look at the wall signage, they've put exactly what they want, and it's been large enough to be legible. And out on this tenant panel, we've seen them put, for instance, just board and brush and do it more of a, either if it's an all caps or a larger block lettering or something that just made it very easy to read and see. I mean, we've seen that plenty of times, and I think ultimately we want them to be successful, and we want them to be seen, and we want people to be able to find them. And I think I have a little concern that with that, it'll just be hard to find them. You'll find the Premier Eye Care. That's probably what they'll tell everybody. Is look for that center. You can see all of that. But the actual board and brush sign, I think that will be hard to read as you're going down the highway there.
And the legibility also, it does also potentially affect traffic safety too. If people are having a difficult time, quickly processing what they see on the sign, they're more apt to slow down and make a quick turning movement in there. So that's, I mean, there is a public safety issue to it as well for having signs being legible from the street.
Well, I think it would be more legible if they just left off the creative studio and had the name.
obviously, you've suggested that, and they came back to you and said no, which I
Yeah.
understand.
Actually, I didn't even suggest it at first. When I found out that, they didn't have the size panel that they thought they had, and I was speaking to the designer for Signco, he had just become aware of that too and was working on the sign. And his original plan was to take the creative studio banner off to make room for the rest of the sign, and that was nixed on his proposal to do that. So,
Well, I
the
also
sign
wonder-
company was moving in that direction, and then it, obviously the customer didn't want it that way, so the sign company, did it this way.
Yeah. I just wonder if it's our role to try, and I agree everything with what you said, Marty. I just wonder if it's our role to try to help them. We've tried to help them. We've suggested taking the banner off of it. Now
Yeah,
it's very small. Is it readable? I think that's something that you may have to look and see and put an example up there and just see for yourself. But we've tried to help them, and if they want to have a logo that small and we think it's okay, then that's their prerogative to do that. Nobody may be able to find it.
Yeah, from the standpoint of the message that's on the sign, I mean, we don't regulate the message.
Yeah.
It's just, is the message legible or not?
It's kind of competing agendas. I mean, we're trying to make the sign small as possible, and that interferes with legibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are we allowed to ask them to alter the sign a little bit?
Well, I mean, we oftentimes will suggest, and make suggestions like take the banner off. If something comes in that's, really, outlandishly colored and doesn't fit within the, town's overall color palettes and that sort of thing, then, sometimes that's asked. But in terms of, telling them what to say on the message is, really not, what we're doing. It's just a matter of, whatever they choose to say needs to be, legible to comply with the code.
I was gonna. Oh, you talk.
No, go ahead, Alan.
Oh, sorry. So I was gonna say, like, I'm thinking visually here. Could we ask them to take do you see how the creative studio kind of like it flares up at the end? Could we ask them to kind of like flatten that and make it more just like a box shape, and then use that extra space from the tails going down, where they can make the board and brush larger?
That,
that
no, they
work
might be
out?
able to do that. And again, I think that the designer from Signco will work and try to come up with a design. If this isn't legible, then, they'll try to come up with a design that'll work.
To me, it's simple. It's just you guys go out and staff looks at it when it's out there kind of in a mock-up and says, we don't think this is legible from the street. Then they have a choice of changing or abandoning it. And,
Yeah, we could do that.
paying somebody else to get another block.
Yeah.
Another tenant.
Yeah, which they could,
They could.
if someone were to
somebody
potentially,
moved in.
lease more than one space in that center, because there's 4 spaces, there could be more room available, but, again, and that's the choice of the tenant or the center owner made the choice to have 4 small panels and 1 large panel, so that was them sort of creating a situation where there wasn't going to be a lot of room for message on any one of those panels.
So I think we revert it back to you and your
Okay.
judgment.
Or they could also take that "and" in the middle, it's about as big as anything else in there, and make it smaller.
Well, they're just wanting to use their logo.
Yeah,
So
Well-
if they can't use their logo because it's not legible, then they have options, but it'll be their choice.
okay.
I would say they don't want to mess with their logo, and I can understand that from a business standpoint.
But what it really boils down to is what are we then suggesting that they do? Obviously, you're talking about the staff looking at it from a legibility standpoint, but then if that is not legible,
Then it's denied.
Then-
You can't put the logo up there.
then that's really what I'm asking is what do we tell them at that point? That they have to come back in
Then
front
they
of
have
the
to
board
redesign the sign or.
and come back
or-
again?
Yeah. Yeah, they would.
Okay. So then how would a motion read that? And so that's a little different than what we've done in the past.
Yeah.
There's a contingent approval upon it being legible on either a mock-up And then if it's not legible or readable from there, then it has to come back for another
Gotta be redone. So
round.
Plan B.
Okay?
I mean, I think that makes sense.
And they need to realize that we're recommending that based on the fact that it will help their business if it can be seen better.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? All right. Do we have a motion to that effect?
So I make a motion that this application be taken to staff, and the staff evaluates the readability in a mock-up or some way of understanding if this passes this code's legibility test, and if it does not, then it's denied. If it does, then it's approved.
All right. We have a motion. Do we have a second to that effect?
I'll second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, so the next item on the ground-mounted sign applications is for the McKinley Station subdivision. That's at Everett Road and Eisenhower Street. One we've taken a brief look at before, and I think they did some work on placement of the sign, and now it's back before us again.
Yeah, this was an odd situation. That you first heard this request in February, and it was tabled at that time pending some additional information being obtained regarding the setbacks of the sign. The north entrance sign is really the one that we were concerned about. It turns out it is too close to the internal property line, but that subdivision is zoned R1 OSR, and that slightly modifies the setback requirements. It does require for monuments and structures and that sort of thing for a subdivision to be 10 foot, a minimum of 10 foot back from, the road rights of way. But it's fairly silent on internal property lines for this type of subdivision structure. And that creates a slight conflict with our sign regulations, which require signs to be set back 10 foot from all property lines, but in this case, the structure is already there. It was put in when the subdivision was being designed. It was actually being built at the same time that the Everett Road project was going on. We think it probably got slid back a little bit further than what it was originally intended to be, but it didn't. The monument that they want to put this on didn't necessarily create a setback violation in and of itself, because it met the setback from the road. It just didn't meet, a setback from the internal property line between the homeowner's lot and lot 30. And but there's really not a true setback on that line for this type of structure that's in the zoning ordinance in that zone. So we ended up with a situation where that typically if they were creating a new sign and putting a new sign structure up, it would have to be 10 foot from the internal property line also. But in this case, all they're proposing to do is put a sign message on an existing structure that's already located there. So we had to figure out, exactly how we deal with that. And given the fact that it's sort of an unintended conflict between the zoning district, which would allow that structure to be that close to the property line, and the sign regulation that wouldn't allow a new sign to be put in that way, we felt like, given that it's an existing structure, we're not creating a setback violation. It's already there, and they're just putting a sign message on an existing structure. There's a secondary issue with this that complicates it a little bit further, in that the monument was inadvertently located within a platted utility and drainage easement. Again, we looked at that. It was probably an oversight when it was set. the town at this point is not going to take action to, to make them rip that monument down. It's got electric service on it for the ground lighting and everything. Given that, again, we don't see any reason why they couldn't put the sign on it, with the understanding that if that monument ever, conflicts with the easement, if there was ever an accident and a car ran into it and it had to be reconstructed, that, any reconstruction of that monument would have to be done in compliance with the code, and therefore, move it to where it didn't violate that easement anymore. But, that's separate and apart from the setback issue. So we just ended up with a conflict where the monument without the sign on it was not a setback violation, but putting the sign on it then created an issue with the sign regulations, which are a separate freestanding ordinance and that aren't part of the zoning ordinance. So, looking on that, and, it really came down to, are we going to let them potentially put that message up on an existing structure? We felt, from a staff perspective, we could, allow that, as the administrators of the sign regulations, if the VRB agrees with that, and given the fact that, we know about the intrusion into the utility and drainage easement, again, is as long as they understand that if there's ever a conflict, if someone ever wants to use that easement, if a utility company comes in and needs to run a line through there and makes them remove that monument, that when it was rebuilt, it would have to be rebuilt in a proper location outside of that. And that's 5 foot on either side of the property line.
And then that monument, did I not understand that the violation there with the setback is up against an open lot?
Well, the monument itself, the actual rock structure is not, does not constitute a
But the
setback
lot right behind it
violation.
is an open lot, right? There's no, or
No,
there is a
there-
home on it?
Yeah, there's a home on it.
Okay.
And the home was actually built after this monument structure went in. So,
Okay.
in terms of a zoning setback, and we're dealing with two different sets of regulations here. We're dealing with a zoning issue and then the sign ordinance issue. The rock structure itself does not constitute a setback violation
Right.
from a zoning standpoint. It is, however, located in a platted drainage and utility easement. Hanging the sign on it would conflict with the sign ordinance's requirement that signs be located 10 feet from all property lines. But that's typically to ensure that a structure doesn't get built too close to a property line. In this case, the structure's already there. So
And so the structure was never a sign to begin with? It was, what was it? Was it a sign?
it's just that rock structure you see on the picture here, with no sign on it. It's just a decorative entryway structure they put at the subdivision. There's a light post that's opposite it on the other side of the entrance road that does have a very small sign on it. It's about 3 square feet, little oval. It's very difficult to read. And there's one of these, or at each entranceway. So each entranceway has one of these stone monuments, and then opposite it is a lamppost with a very small
Got it.
sign on it. And what they want to do is put larger signs that would be more visible on these blank monument structures that are already pre-existing.
Well, to me, that makes sense. I mean, most neighborhoods have signs like that on their monument structures. Obviously, they're usually in compliance with setbacks and easements and all that. And it seems to be a legible sign.
And again, if they were building it to put a sign on it, then, we, want to see that, the 10-foot adhered to. But given that it's an existing structure, it was built, it was permitted. So now it's just a matter of, can they put the McKinley Station message on the front of it?
And as you said in your notes, if it were to get destroyed, it would have to be revisited.
Yeah, and that's a separate issue from the setback issue. That's the fact that when they put it in there, and we think what happened is when Everett Road was being done and the walking trails along it, there were some slight changes made at the front there, and we think they pushed it back a little bit, and they got in that easement, and no one caught it at the time. If it had been caught at the time, it would have been, stopped and moved forward, but it's already there. So here's about where the northern one is, and that's really the only one with the issue, where I wrote in the sign in red there, and that's at the north entrance. And here's the survey that shows where the sign is in relation to the road rights-of-way and the property line. So it's very close to that internal property lines. It's less than a foot from the internal line between Lot 31, which is the homeowner association lot, and Lot 30. But it's 10.1 feet from Eisenhower Street, and it's a full 26 feet back from Everett Road right away. So it's, well set back from the streets. It's just that internal line that was the issue.
Apparently, this has already been brought up and discussed and approved by the homeowners association, right?
I think there's someone here from the homeowners board, and, this is something that they proposed, again, back in February. And we wanted to nail down exactly what the setbacks were and try to determine how the structure got put there and under what circumstances it got put there. We think we have a sense of that, and then it was just a matter of working through the conflicts between the sign regulations and the OSR R1 zoning district. We had those resolved, and then we realized that it was also located in that utility and drainage easement. But that's a conflict that if someone needs to use that easement for its intended purpose, their sign will have to be, the entire structure would have to be moved.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that point, they'd have to reconstruct it, and they'd have to reconstruct it in conformance with the drainage and utility easement.
I think as long as the homeowners are okay with it and they've brought it up, I don't see why there would be a problem with it.
And
I
part of
agree.
our recommendation was that we get something from the HOA, that they understand that,
Right.
that if there's, for any reason that monument is, has to be moved, whether because of conflict with the utility line, or even if a truck ran into it and it,
Yeah.
was ruined and had to be rebuilt, that it would have to be rebuilt in conformance.
Yeah, well, I'm comfortable with it under that condition, absolutely. All right, any more discussion? All right, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve it with the understanding that if there is something that makes the sign be knocked down or whatever, that the homeowners are aware of the fact that it would have to be replaced and relocated.
All right, we have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and second, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? So we're going to move on down to the landscape plan applications now for a proposed office retail building development at 12802 Kingston Pike, part of the Renaissance Center.
This plan is for a new office/retail building that's been proposed. It's been to the Planning Commission for site plan approval. It received site plan approval last month, Mark? Subject to a number of conditions. They're working on that. We reviewed the landscape plan for this board. I think we had 6 subject twos. Most of them are clarifications or minor adjustments to the plan. I think they have a corrected plan with them. We can recommend approval subject to those 6 items being corrected, and, of course, staff will want to review it and look at it. But there weren't a lot of issues with it. It's a fairly prominent site. It's at the front of the Renaissance development there, on the entranceway that's furthest to the west. It's that corner on the right-hand side if you're entering the Renaissance development. It's it's a pre-graded and partially filled lot. I think when the original development came in, it does cross a little drainage way there, and that was put in as part of the original development, so there's already a bridge structure there, and it'll, that's where the entranceway to the development is. So they're dealing a little bit with drainage through there that they have to deal with, and obviously there's a creek behind it as well. So they've worked quite a bit to get the facility on there with the site plan, and now they're at the landscaping plan phase. Do y'all have any questions about the recommendations or any
No,
other
I
issues?
mean, this is the site we, I think, looked at previously, right, for a potential restaurant or something
Yeah.
else was on there, and we'd already approved that.
Mhm.
So it's pretty much, I mean, I
It's
don't-
very similar. The
very similar is
parking,
what I'm saying, yeah.
yeah, the parking lot for this development is a little smaller than what was proposed on the last one. Obviously, the parking demands for office or retail are less than for restaurants, so they were able to cut down the amount of asphalt they were going to have to put on the site and cut down, some of the additional paving they were going to have to do. The plans, designers here, if you have any questions for.
Do you know what's going in there?
We have a medical user for about 2/3 of the building that has expressed interest, but we do not have a lease executed yet. And then the other 1/3 of the building is speculative, either some sort of retail or office.
Well, I didn't have any questions when I looked at it. I thought they did a good job of putting it together. Anybody else have anything to say?
Don't have any comment.
If there's no further discussion, do we have a motion?
I'll motion to approve,
Subject to.
subject to the 6 points that you've outlined.
All right. We have a motion with the subject to. We have a second.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? All right. Thank you very much. Anything else that you need to add to us tonight, Bart?
No, that's it for tonight.
All right. Well, with that we'll end the meeting for this month. Thank you all very much.